Welcome to the PowettPlay Podcast, where international cricketer Kieran, Powell and marketing genius Shannon join forces, bringing you captivating conversations with the biggest players in cricket and business. Join us as we dive into the lives of current stars in the cricketing world, the legends before them, and those extraordinary icons whose performances changed the game in both cricket and business. Exploring journeys both on and off the pitch, the boardroom, and everything in between. Get ready for an exhilarating blend of cricket, life, and business insights, with two insatiably passionate, infuriatingly no-holds-barred hosts, who, unfortunately for the rest of us, live and breathe this stuff for a living.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 40 of the PowettPlay Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Kieran Powell. How are you, Kai?
Bit under the weather, but I'm okay. How are you? I know that you've had a tough week, so you've taken a bit of time off so that you can grieve.
Yeah, it's been it's been rough, to be honest with you. I'm pretty sad, obviously losing my good friend in a bit of an accident and stuff, but life has to go on and stuff, and he would definitely be wanting us to be cracking on and things. And, unfortunately, we are a listener and a viewer down because he was an avid fan of the podcast, and it's sad and grateful that he played such a big part in my life, and we've got some fond memories. But, I appreciate, obviously, you mentioned it then. The Test series between West Indies and South Africa starts tomorrow, I think it is. Or it might be Thursday off the top of my head. How do you see that going?
If history's our guide,
yeah,
it's not looking great, is it? South Africa have won 22 of the 32 games that both teams have played. I think right now both teams are pretty much in the same position, though. When you really look at it, they've got relatively good bowling attacks. Very inexperienced batting lineups.
Yeah.
So it basically comes down to which team can bat better in those conditions. I think for the West Indies this time around, it's a lot better planned. I remember having this conversation with Miles Bascom last year, actually, in terms of playing matches based on the opposition in conditions that were probably more suitable to the West Indies. I mean, you want to maximize your home conditions.
Yeah, definitely.
The last time we played South Africa in the Caribbean, we played them in St. Lucia. We might as well have played them in Centurion or Joburg or something. Just make them right at home with you. Yeah. But I think obviously playing them in Trinidad and Guyana brings West Indies back into the equation, sorts of levels the playing field as well. So
yeah, definitely.
I think it's going to be interesting. Ideally, I would say 1-1 draw based on both teams being so level. I think that the West Indies may be able to scrap something if they can put a good test match together. So we'll see.
How do you think, from your insights, obviously playing in Trinidad and stuff, how do you see the track playing in that first test?
Depends on how it's prepared. I think when they leave grass on it, it's probably after, let's say, St. Lucia. In recent years, after St. Lucia, I'd say it's probably the second best track in the Caribbean once they leave grass on it. It plays really well. There's something for the seamers up front. Very good for the batters throughout the middle, and then the spinners come into play towards the end of the test match. So perfect cricket wicket for long format cricket. And the atmosphere in Trinidad as well, I don't know what it is, but the ball always does something for the seamers there. So the ball will swing about naturally in Trinidad. So I think it's a good cricketing wicket. You can expect, if they prepare it properly and they leave a good coverage of grass on it for it to be a very evenly fought contest.
Do you see the West Indies going with two spinners, or do you see them going with another quick potentially?
It's a tricky one, that, because if they go with two spinners, then you have Jason Holder being your third seamer, which in England he was your fourth seamer, and I don't think that he sort of showed enough in England for you to merit
fully that being
him
the third.
At this stage. I mean, he's, I guess, working his way back in. He needs to have a big series as well, or there's going to be lots of calls on his position in the team, rightfully so. I mean, he's batting at number 6 now, which is interesting because to me, at the height of his powers when he was captain, he was batting at number 7 and 8. So for him to be batting at number 6 now is an interesting call. But more so on the bowling side, I've never seen his bowling look like the way it did. Like, it didn't really look very penetrative at all. You had the keeper
I know what you
keeping
mean.
up with the stump at one point, you know?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's never a good sign when you have the keeper keeping up with the stump for you in Test cricket. So
no, and not when you relate to what you're saying here at the point in terms of being the third spinner. I don't think the third seamer. I don't think you can have your third seamer with the ability for the keeper to come up, sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's no sort of agency bias in this question here. It's a genuine question from my thoughts. Do you think they've missed the boat a little bit by potentially picking Roston here to give them that extra spin option, and then, you know, obviously the batting side of things as well?
100%. Definitely, I think that Roston would have been a good fit for this team. Obviously, in terms of combinations that you're looking to play.
Yeah.
I don't know what the situation there or what the conversations were around maybe possibly having him or not.
Yeah.
I find it interesting as well that there's no, I guess, mention of Jimbo either, because you look at it, Jimbo played only 6 of the 7 first-class games. He was in the hunt for most wickets again, obviously.
Yeah, obviously,
and if you're talking about off spinners, I don't know if, for whatever reason, they've sort of drawn a line on the selecting Jimbo, but there's no comparison in my opinion between Brian Charles and Jimbo as well. So interesting selection, but Brian Charles is someone that's been around for a long time and has played, President's 11 matches, A-team games and all these stuff. So I guess it's, when you're looking at the options, this is the this is not me saying it. This is just from what you've seen when you talk about Roston, Jimbo, Kevin Sinclair. This is the next man in line. So
yeah, no. When I saw the Brian Charles selection, I did think it might have played a part that one of the Test matches is in his, at Trinidad. And he is from Trinidad, isn't he, by the way? So I made sure I got that correct. I maybe thought that, but again, I agree. I don't want to, again, they say I don't want it to be perceived as being a bit agency biased, but you look at obviously Rakeem Cornwall, like you mentioned. How can you keep looking past his statistics and what he's done if you're going to go with an off spinner, and stuff? So, it'd be interesting to see who they go down. And at the very start of this conversation about that, you talked about the very similar sort of sides in terms of, from an experience perspective. I do think though that the South African side has probably got a little bit more of that experience side, but again, it doesn't take much because we spoke about it before in terms of the lack of test matching and stuff. But I wanted to ask you a little bit in terms of some of the exclusions, in terms of obviously Kurt McKenzie not making the squad, and then also Zach McCaskey not making the squad. What did you make of that?
I think let's start with the Kurt McKenzie.
Yeah,
I think the selectors did him an injustice in selecting him in the first place into the Test team.
Right. Okay.
From last year, you look at when he got selected into the team. That season, he was dropped from Jamaica's team.
Yeah,
I think averaging whatever it was. It wasn't much.
No.
He went on to play the best of the best for the academy and scored a double century, and then and this is how West Indies cricket operates. Like, they have to justify the academy, and therefore, if you're in the academy, you're in prime position to make a West Indies team. If you perform, you will get selected. And so I think that he wasn't necessarily ready at the time, but they selected him based on one score as opposed to overall
The actual
season
overall. Yeah.
and saying, all right, there is some potential there. Let's continue to groom and develop this young man.
Yeah.
Obviously, he got a half century in Australia, but in England, it didn't work out. And I mean, you look at, again, this first class season, not strong numbers again.
No.
One half century, I think, in the last match of the season. So there wasn't much confidence for him going into an England tour. And then that's where you look at things like when we spoke about there was quite a long gap between the end of the season and the Test series.
Yeah.
Could they have gotten him over to England to play club cricket, first class cricket, whatever the case was?
Yeah.
So that at least he would be going into that series with experience in those conditions. So I think that in that sense, he was done an injustice. And it's going to be interesting to see, I guess, how he manages, or if he manages to bounce back from this, because now he has to wait until Super 50, which I think is in November.
Yeah.
So he's got a long time now to go and work on his game and try and get some things aligned. Zach McCaskey is an interesting one as well, because I don't understand what the selection criteria are, or whatever the selection policy may be. But apart from how he was selected into the team, you look at, for example, a Tajner and Chanderpaul was dropped after having, I guess, a couple of bad matches for the West Indies and an average first class. It wasn't horrible. You know, he had the same first class season as a McCaskey or a couple other guys.
Yeah.
But he's shown that he has the ability to stick around in Test cricket.
Yeah.
So I thought that he would have gone on the tour as maybe the potential backup opener, because he still pretty much has the second highest average amongst the Test batters that were in that team after Craig Bradbury. And so you look at a Zachary McCaskey now being dropped, having been in the Test team for, I think, maybe 2 or 3 tours.
Yeah, Australia and Did he go to India as well?
Oh no, so he didn't do the India tour. He was Australia. He was South Africa for the A-team series. That's what I'm getting confused with. And then the English season, but then wasn't able to participate in the match just gone, that Presidents or that Championship 11 match as well. And then you look at situations like a Solozano scoring a century after having a better season than McCaskey. I'd still think that Tajner and Chanderpaul should be ahead of McCaskey as well.
Yeah.
So then how does he go from being the reserve opener to potentially being back down to number 5 option now without having played a match and being dropped out of the squad? So I mean, the selection process and policies, I'm not sure about, because I thought that if you really look at what's happening, they probably should have dropped Kurt McKenzie for the last Test match.
He said that. He did say that,
and let McCaskey bat at number 3.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to see what you have. The series was over. Likewise, I thought that, now that they said that Alzari has been arrested, and I think I might be jumping the gun. I think you were going to come to this anyway. But first of all, if you're a West Indian cricketer and they tell you you've been arrested, that is not a good thing, because the West Indies don't rest players.
Correct.
So
you make of that cricket to be rested.
Yeah, you make of that what you may, but understand that when the West Indies tell you you've been arrested, that is not a good sign. And for me, if they want to say that they're managing Alzari's workload, he didn't have a very heavy or active IPL. He was at the IPL, but he only played, I think, the first 3 games.
Yeah.
Obviously had the T20 World Cup and then had the Test series. Again, after the first 2 Test matches and we lost, I thought it would have been a perfect opportunity to say to Alzari, okay, have a break for the 3rd Test, and then there's a week in between. So he would have eventually, adding up days, had just under a 3-week break heading into the first test of this series. And I think that would have been a lot better because he could have, in the nets, continued to work and craft his game and bring it back towards bowling test lengths for this first test match against South Africa.
Yeah.
As opposed to resting him. And now his next few months of cricket again are going to be white ball cricket, bringing him back into a test series against Bangladesh in December. So there's no sort of cricket for him to sort of work back into test form. So the selection processes have been interesting, and I mean, I'm not surprised by any of it, but it doesn't make much sense.
No, and I think that, yeah, as soon as I read that Alzari being rested, same as you, I thought it was just a nice little PR message in terms of trying to make it sound like it's all harmonious within, but, we're not behind the door in that, and we know that what that basically means. I think you made a really good point there about the like of Zach McCaskey and Kurt McKenzie potentially coming over to play league cricket or county cricket or whatever it may be beforehand, because in the end, the West Indies selected 2 lads who'd been over here playing league cricket in Jeremiah Lewis and then obviously in Akeem Jordan. So in their head, that was obviously something that was benefiting them to be able to then come into the test squad. They neither of them played a test match, but he was in the squad. So surely it would have made sense for some of the peripheral players or someone who you believed was going to be potentially in and around, or also needing some, time at the crease in the UK conditions. It should have happened. There's not a shortage of that to take place over here in the UK. So you would have liked to have seen that, be communicated and agreed, because it would have naturally benefited, the West Indies over here. And then you might be looking ahead of this South Africa series in a different light because of, varied outcomes might have taken place.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make much sense because kudos to, for example, Kavem Hodge, who was probably the standout and emerging player of the tour.
Yeah.
His preparation, whatever he did back home in Dominica, obviously seemed to work for him. And I think it's interesting as well. You look at it, sort of 2 of the players that have done probably the best in recent vintage of being selected for the West Indies are him and Nkrumah Bonner.
Yeah.
And you look at the ages in which they were selected.
Yeah.
Both of them around that sort of 30, 31 range. And that's when, I mean, in the Caribbean, because we don't play enough cricket, that's when sort of most players start to come into their own and understand their games. And it's not as difficult for them to translate to international cricket. And I think that's obviously something very interesting, because the West Indies have been going for youth man policy for probably 2 to 3 decades now. But in my knowledge, my little knowledge of life, my 34 years, I know that young people pretty much run schools and universities. If you're looking for successful entities or businesses, it's always experienced people who have gone through the graft and over time have acquired those skills. And so I'm not saying I'm against selecting young people at all. If I was selected at a very young age, but if you have enough experienced people around them in the team to guide them and mold them, then you can select a few young players in between so that the transition phase isn't something that you get stuck in.
Yeah.
But I think that you look at the West Indies team and you think of having a Bonner in there somewhere with a Hodge in the middle. Obviously, Hodge is still very inexperienced. Bonner was coming into his own. Yeah. But then that looks a lot better in terms of people that are willing to fight and stick it out and bat for a long time.
Yeah.
As opposed to young players finding their way in first-class cricket. And then you're throwing them into test cricket as well. I mean, it's all fair and well to have talent, but that talent also needs to be mature enough to perform at the international level. You look at Australia, for example, brought back Usman Khawaja at 34.
Yeah.
And he's had the best phase of his career between 34 and now 37. And there's no talk of them dropping him. It's just a matter of whenever he wants to retire because he's performing. And so I think that we need to get rid of this stigma in the Caribbean where you're thinking about, once you're past 30, you're old. Generally, life expectancy for African Caribbean men is 68. So 30 is nowhere near old. You've got another 30 something years to live. So
no, definitely. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how it goes, because I think in this situation, it looks like it's going to be a more, I don't want to, that sounds like being disrespectful here, but I think it'll be a lot more competitive series, as you mentioned. You said there about being 1-1. But I just think that there's going to be, time to see some of this youth, as you mentioned there, that they're going with to sort of step up, because ultimately after these two test matches, if it hasn't worked, and I'm not saying 2 test matches is a long time, but when you combine it with the England series as well, you're going to have to look at some alternatives to making this work, because you can't keep going with this youthful policy and it not working. If you do need to integrate with some experience, and you're going to have to go and do that at the end of the day. So I'm sure we'll discuss that over the next few weeks anyway, and your insights will be extremely valuable as always.
I think the next interesting point, before we switch topics, is probably the coaching of it as well, because I think Andre Coley might be under a bit of pressure as well. I mean, you look at the news, you see Otis Gibson is going to be available from the end of this summer, and that's someone that has a wealth of experience. He's done the West Indies job before. He's won a World Cup for the West Indies. I'm pretty sure he would be interested in probably having a next crack at international cricket. He's been an amazing coach working with fast bowlers around the world. You look at
we spoke about it.
We look at the Rabadas, the Kemar Roach, the Jimmy Anderson, the Stroke Broad. When he worked with all of them went top 5 in the world. So with this crop of young West Indian fast bowlers and what he'd be able to impart on them, I think that'd be interesting. So I think there are a few people in this series, whether it be players or from a management standpoint, that need to, I guess, see some things go in their favor.
Yeah, definitely. And even when we spoke about him just before Christmas last year, there was literally no doubt at all about his passion towards West Indies cricket. And like you mentioned there about the fast bowlers, you look at the impact he could have on a Shamar Joseph, for instance. You're talking about taking him to that next level. That would rocket sort of like West Indies cricket again. Do you know what I mean? That would be like a real sort of, it could be a drive to that next level. So, it's a really, really interesting point. And I know I read the article about him obviously leaving Yorkshire, but, I didn't really think too much in terms of obviously him coming back into the fold. But now you said that, I think it's a really, really good point. A really good point, and fingers crossed everything goes to plan over the, this and stuff. And there isn't a change or what may be, but, we definitely want to keep an eye on for sure. Obviously, it was a bit of a sad passing in terms of Graham Thorpe passing away. And I look back, and he was a bit before my time, but he's a very, very elegant left-hander. So, what was your memories of him?
Interesting one. That obviously, you look at sort of the latter bits of, I guess, his life, working with the England team, and then some sort of falling out, and then just becoming terminally ill, and obviously an untimely passing. You never want to see anyone sort of die was still relatively young. You want to see people live to have a fulfilled life to your old age, see your kids get old, see your grandkids, that sort of stuff. So condolences to his family and all of his friends, his loved ones, etc. But definitely a player that, for that period of English cricket was probably a stalwart, 16 test centuries, 100 test matches.
Yeah.
Very, very impactful player, someone that sort of fought, obviously could be elegant when needed to, but he was also someone that dug in and fought a lot for England as well. And, the game is never, and the world is never a better place when you lose sort of these people. So very sad.
Yeah. I think that, you mentioned there about him being a fighter and quite dogged. I mentioned there about his elegance because that's how I sort of always remember him being that sort of, or maybe that's just me with left-handers. I always feel that they're slightly more elegant than right-handed batter. But he's scoring a century on your Test debut, but not only Test debut versus Australia in an Ashes series, speaks volumes. I'm sure he got a double century away in Sri Lanka on a tough track, facing the likes of Muralitharan and stuff. So it shows that he had that sort of dogged fight, which, is something that's invaluable for Test cricket to have that time. Like you meant, we spoke about before in terms of batting time and stuff. I think he did that, and he stuck in and fought and give it everything. And I think that, you mentioned there towards the final parts of his career, I think the impact he had on the England team, especially in the World Cup under Owen Morgan, from a coaching perspective, especially from that batting coaching side of things, I think had a real impact on that white ball team. In the that 2017, 2018, and obviously then culminating and winning it in 2019. I think he played a massive part in the likes of with Root in the white ball stuff, and obviously with Ben Stokes and things. So I think that he's left a legacy on English cricket, and I think that like you said, it's very, very sad, and condolences to to his family and all his friends.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a bit of a question in terms of T20 cricket. So Roston's playing in the GT20, so I've been keeping an eye on that more so and watching a few of the games over on TNT here, and it's not, I don't know, I don't say not going to plan, but it seems to be a little bit, not a great standard of cricket in terms of how it's coming together. There was a very, very low scoring game yesterday on a track that was just, wasn't favourable at all. The franchise circuit, so, players travelling around, at what point do you think that it could come a little bit detrimental in terms of the volume that are being played, but just not the standard really that's there?
I think for obviously associate nations, it's a bit tricky. I think for them to be able to have good standard leagues, you need to increase the number of overseas players playing in the 11. So you look at what the ILT20 does, for example. I think it's something like 7 overseas players per 11. And then that gives the local domestic players, because there's not a huge national pool of players in these countries to fill out 6 franchises. So I think that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. Obviously, as well, the pitches and the preparation of these pitches is something that needs to be taken into consideration, because there are a few things you can't play cricket without. A ball is one, and a pitch is one as well. Yeah. So I think that they probably need to look into the standard of the pitches.
Yeah.
To ensure that they're up to, and I think that's something that ICC needs to have, like a minimum standard type of pitch around the world, and a minimum standard preparation time for these pitches as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you just said there about having these standards, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head there. I think the ICC should be looking at getting involved a little bit here and thinking, how do we, naturally, cricket being played in Canada is very, very good. It's good for us sports fans, and it's good for cricket on the whole. But they've got to get it right where it doesn't, so it's not a 58 all out, and then they chase it down 4 or 5 down, and that shouldn't be how it's not entertaining in the way that T20 has been designed. So I think that the way that the ICC probably should get involved a little bit, and maybe they need to do a bit more education around that side of things potentially in terms of how to look after it and what to do and things. But also, I suppose, naturally, the back of that come seasons and how do you know, and things like that. Because I know there's been quite a few games rain affected as well and stuff. And I suppose when you're naturally trying to fit all these in, 365 days of the year, there's going to be times when you're going to be playing franchise tournaments that are out of season. So I suppose naturally there's all those parts of elements that you're trying to put together.
Yeah, I think maybe what the ICC can look into as well, maybe is, especially for the associate nations, having an ICC accredited groundsman going out to these places however long beforehand and making sure that these pitches are prepared to a certain standard over X amount of time, just like you would at a World Cup. And therefore you ensure that at least these pitches and not the cricket, are not an excuse for the lack of quality.
Yeah, it's a fair point. A good point. Have you seen much of the 100?
To be fair, I haven't seen much cricket. I've been down and out, but what I've seen of the 100 is it's been, I guess, a very slow start. The scores haven't been great to start with.
No, it's not, to be honest with you. I think that it's the one thing that, from my opinion, I wanted to, because it's on terrestrial TV over here, so it's free to air. I always want it to obviously be light up so that naturally it gathers this interest and people get talking, but it just hasn't been there from that quality perspective. And I think there's a little bit in terms of the names aren't really here playing it as well, with the, some of them have slept back in now. So the England players have come back in a little bit after the series and stuff. But I think once he got started, and that's when the real hype comes into a tournament, when it's launched, when it starts, having not the greater names, no disrespect to the overseas who are playing in it, but it's not, the names as such that you'd probably like. And then with no England players, it's probably just got off to a bit of a lull, I suppose. And then with the low scores and stuff, it's not really got going. But I think it's started to kick over a little bit now. And then maybe a little bit of the better weather's kicked in as well, because we've, typical over here, it's not been great, but the last 2 or 3 weeks has got a bit nicer. So I think that may play a part in the pitches being a bit better and the scores being a bit greater. But, it's I think, again, I think the Oval Invincibles look strong again and stuff. So be interested to see where it goes. Manchester Originals haven't won a game yet, which is not great.
True Mancunian.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think the ECV probably need to look at a few things with the 100, because there's no point having the 100 on the same time that you've got the domestic one-day competition, which has now pretty much been turned into a second 11 competition where people are just racking up stats. Also having a Vitality T20 Blast, which serves no purpose if you've got the 100. So basically the 100 comes across as, from a player standpoint, to me, it looks as though the 100 is just the most financially viable option.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily something that is really capturing the players and making them want to be a part of it. I think that they need to declutter the English summer a lot. Obviously, you've got your 4-day championship stuff. You're going to have a 50-over competition as well. They need to make up their mind whether they're going to have the 100 or the Vitality Blast. Whichever one it is, they have to move forward with that and sort of shelve the other, because then it literally makes the calendar too packed for players to play in it. And then they also have to look at why overseas players aren't coming to the 100 anymore. Like, you look at MLC sort of running at the same time.
Yeah.
You look at GT20 now. I think CPL starts at the end of this month, and the 100 just seems like a very long tournament, and guys can make the same money in 2 to 3 weeks in other tournaments and get back home to their families.
Yeah.
As well as the tax hit that you take coming to England.
Well, you've always said that, yeah. You've always mentioned that.
So it's always been something that players are very cognizant about when it comes to playing cricket in England, you're gonna take a big hit. So I think the ECB need to look at these factors and sort of come up with some way that they can work around these things.
No, I agree completely. As it's currently, I think it's 1-0 actually to Sri Lanka. Have you seen much of the series between Sri Lanka and India?
I generally catch the highlights the next day, but it's been interesting because it's obviously not been high scoring events. Sri Lanka is generally a place where you can be going along well and you lose a wicket and you tend to lose 4 or 5 very quickly. And so I think what India has found is they've gotten off to good starts in both occasions. Rohit's looking in sublime form. But then he sort of puts out and then they get stuck a bit in the middle, lose probably 3-4 wickets, get an next partnership, and then Sri Lanka have been pulling through. So that's been an interest. And you look at the teams that Sri Lanka have been playing as well, they've been playing sort of 4-5 spinners in their 11, or guys that can bowl spin. So I mean, it would be a very big win for them if they're able to pull off a victory in the next match.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, it's been interesting series so far, given that it's not very high scoring, and India would be used to playing on, I guess, pitches that are a lot more easy for run making in limited overs cricket.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a leg spinner. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He got 6 for
Jeffrey Van der Sey.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. But, you mentioned before about the experience factor. I'm sure he's 34, 35.
Yeah.
You think about, again, this idea of obviously that experience and understanding your game to go and do that, whether it is a turning wicket or not, to take 6 against that India side, it's a hell of an achievement, and it shows that the guy, whether he, in experience in terms of playing international cricket, but the experience he's picked up, it's invaluable at the back, to go and do that anyway.
Exactly. And you're talking about someone that he can easily quite go on and play for another 3, 4, 5 years for Sri Lanka. He's 34, but you look at Ravichandran Ashwin, for example, who's 37.
Yeah.
And there's no signs of him slowing down or stopping or anything, So I mean, with the advent of technology and understanding how players can look after themselves more, players are going deeper and deeper, longer and longer into their careers. I don't think that age should be a mitigating factor as long as you're performing.
No, I agree. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. And like you said, it'd be interesting to see if they can win that series. It's massive. Even though it's probably going to be it's going to be separate in terms of the team that come over to England. I think the impact it has in a cricketing nation when you beat India like that will have a big positive effect for the Test series over here in England as well. The news obviously came out that Matthew Mott had been sacked by England. Is that something you sort of seen coming?
Yeah. You look at the performances of England in the 50-over World Cup a few months before that weren't great. You look at the performances of England in the Caribbean in the T20 World Cup, and it was very stop-start. It just never seemed to have any fluidity, any rhythm in the performances of the England cricket team. And I would say that pretty much happened in alignment with Owen Morgan's retirement. They still haven't, I guess, sort of. I mean, I know they won that T20 World Cup in Australia, but barring that, their cricket has sort of just looked as though like it's gone from it's looked like it's gone from being the benchmark of white ball cricket to playing catch up to the rest of the world, where they literally everything just sort of flipped overnight. And I think that with Mott going, I think you'll also see quite a few players going as well. You look at Moeen Ali, obviously. Ben Stokes has retired. Jason Roy doesn't get selected much these days, and there'll be probably a few players in between there as well. So you'll see some new faces come along. It'd be interesting to see who comes in as a coach. And it's interesting that Butler has been kept on as captain, with only Mott being fired. So I don't know what the thinking is, if they don't think that there's an I guess, ready-made skipper available to them. But
yeah, it's a good
it'd be
point.
interesting to see as they go.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the only thing I would mention about Matthew Mott is we've talked about it before in terms of the English schedule. The only time that the players from England, or the English players per se, can only play 40 over cricket is at this moment in time. So the Royal London is taking place, as you mentioned there, and no disrespect to the lads playing in it, is very much like a second 11 or tournament, which is how it is, because obviously the better players of the counties are representing whoever that may be in the 100. So we haven't played, or these players who are looking to come into the side and not playing, or certainly not playing any 50 over cricket, because we played the Royal London 40, which is 40 overs. It's like you said, in terms of the priority going into that 2019 World Cup, it felt like a priority. It felt like everything was working towards that, and then it came into place, and obviously it was a success. But since then, it has just gone, and it's just withered away completely. And I think that whoever takes over has got to try and get that infrastructure back in place where the players are playing 50 over cricket, or at least 40 over cricket.
Well, I was just about to ask you, why is it a 40 over tournament?
Exactly. I don't know. I don't know whether they tried to make it slightly hybrid in terms of a bit more. And it's, at the end of it's not working, because the other thing as well is, and I'm a massive fan of outgrounds in the UK. So Lancashire plays some cricket in Southport and at Blackpool and at Segberg. It's nice to see, but these games are now playing at outgrounds, and it just feels very much palmed off. And it's going to have an impact. So whichever coach comes in, and some brilliant names are mentioned, how they're going to sit down and look at statistics or looking at who's doing well based on people who aren't playing 50 or 40 over cricket.
Well, that's very interesting, because as you said, the better players, or the players that are playing for England, aren't playing in these tournaments. Another thing is, how do you get them to play in these tournaments when there's so many franchise opportunities on, and everyone gets given, I guess, an NOC to go and play in these tournaments, because you don't want to stop them from earning. What's the priority? Where does the priority lie, from you, for example, as an English supporter? Like, what would you like to see the ECB make, I guess, sort of mandatory from these players?
I think I'd just like to see the structure be a bit more clearer. So we've got the county championship, we have one T20 tournament, and we have a 50 over tournament. Sandwiched in between that, naturally, is going to be international cricket. So we'll have, a test series. You might play a two test series against whoever, then you might have your 4 or 5, one against whoever. Then the back end of September, we tend to play a bit of one-day stuff. That's what I'd like to see, is that structure. I don't think that the blueprint of what's happened for the past 10 years is broken. So that's how it worked. We had the 3 tournaments and international cricket. It worked, in my opinion. That's where we've got an issue now, because you mentioned there about Jason Roy. So if you've got a specific person who says, right, I want to get my international 50 over cricket back on track, I want to represent England as an opening batter, I don't know what he's going to do. How does he do it?
Yeah, there's no set pathway, because I think what you find happening a lot more around the world is players get selected to their national teams from sort of T20 franchises to play 50 over cricket, which doesn't make any sense, because 50 over cricket and 20 over cricket are two completely different formats, two completely different.
Correct.
50 over cricket, to me, resembles more of a test match than of a T20 match until you get to the last 10 overs.
It has a flow. It has a form. It has a,
yeah.
You know what I mean? It has bits of the 50 overs, which, like you said, it resembles. It does. I agree.
Yeah. So it's interesting, I guess, the direction cricket is taking. And if you remember correctly, let's say sort of a year, 18 months ago, there's a big talk about binning one-day cricket altogether.
Mm.
And now you look at 50 over World Cups, no one would tell me that that's a good idea now.
No. But I just think in terms of like, we've spoke about it before in terms of the importance that Joe Root played in 50 over cricket in the World Cup. So he played, and he batted 4 or 3, wherever he was, and he played the glue. So how would you develop a player that's going to give you that stability in a 50 over game? So we spoke about it loads in the World Cup with Roston, how that's what he could do, and even Shea to a certain degree. But so how does somebody develop that skill when it's not being played? You don't.
Exactly. I mean, first of all, they're playing 40 over cricket. Second of all, they're playing too much cricket.
Yeah.
Third of all, they're not playing the best players in the competition for you to develop younger players against high quality opposition, so that when they get onto the international stage, they know that I've just played Royal London 50 over, not 40 over.
Yeah.
I've just faced a Jofra Archer last week. I've just faced Adil Rashid the week before that. I've been making runs consistently. I am ready to go and play against Australia, India, whoever the case is.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Like I said, I hope that the new coach they get involved, tries and stamps his authority on that. It's going to be an uphill task to do that massively because of the way that the ECB work. But I think that, some of the names mentioned, there's been some big names in terms of, Flintoff looks favourable to get the job. I think Trescothick won't be ruled out, even though he's gone in as an interim basis. You mentioned, obviously, Kumar Sangakkara has been mentioned. There's some big names there.
Yeah, I think as you said, it looks like Freddie's in the lead to get the job at the moment. Obviously, him and Rob Key go a long way back as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So that'd be interesting. And obviously, they've taken this approach where, from a player standpoint and from a coaching standpoint, they're not, I guess, afraid to go a bit left field in terms of their choices and selections. He's obviously someone that will be very much respected, not only in the English dressing room, but around the world, because Freddie's impact that he's had on the game. He's been a tremendous player for such a long time. But the other names being mentioned as well aren't any worse either. I mean, you're talking about Kumar Sangakkara, one of the greatest players ever, and Andy Flower, again, also one of the greatest players to have played this game.
Yeah. He's been mentioned as well.
And the former English coach that went to Australia and won an Ashes 3-1 the last time England won a cricket match in Australia. So it'd be interesting to see what route they go, because no one ever thought that they would have gone with, for example, a Brendan McCullum for a test job. I thought he would have probably gotten the one-day job. So it's interesting how they think about things, but it all comes down to, I guess, the style that they've identified that they want to play and selecting someone that fits that mold.
Well, I've got an interesting point to make here. You texted me a month ago saying about Harry Brook being captain of the Northern Super Chargers, and you think that he could be England's next one-day captain. And Flintoff's involved at the Northern Super Chargers. From a coaching perspective, I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that take place. I know you mentioned there about Butler, but I think that could be the next little route they're going down. Work with each other, and then that's the way it goes.
I don't have a problem with that. I think that Harry Brook probably should have been made the captain, allow Josh Butler to just continue to play. Harry Brook is ascending nicely. I mean, at 25, he could potentially have another captain there for probably the next 10 years. Build up his experience in one day and limited overs cricket, and eventually take over the test team as well at some point. So I wouldn't have had a problem with that. And that probably will be what happens anyway, because Butler may choose to, after the Champions Trophy, step down, which is just in a couple of months. So you never know.
No, I think like you said, I think that's probably where it's going to. Would you leave Joss in charge of the T20 stuff though?
It's interesting because I'm assuming the next T20 World Cup is in 26.
26, yeah.
Is it 26 or 27? So it depends on, I guess, his appetite after the Champions Trophy, because he may not leave it up to the selectors. He may resign based on, I guess, the performances of the England team in the Champions Trophy.
Yeah.
But for now, I don't think it necessarily makes a difference whether he is or isn't the T20 captain. I think what they can do, maybe for the rest of this year, is probably rest Joss from, I guess, T20 internationals and allow for a younger player, sort of what India does, where you had like Hardik captaining quite a few games. You have Sky now as captain. You have various people, I guess, getting that captaincy experience. So in the event of something happening to Joss, because they've been, I guess, a drought in leadership options now in the English team, that you start creating various different leadership options.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Good point. And like I said, it's that pre-planning aspect which hopefully have a nice positive advantage on England as well. So yeah, interesting. Definitely something to see how that progresses. But thank you very much, Kai, for tonight. We've discussed everything, I think, today. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Lots of cricket happening, so obviously lots to talk about. And obviously, Sri Lanka head over to the UK pretty soon. West Indies start tomorrow, so it gets busy, and CPL starting as well.
Yeah, definitely. Lots to talk about, which is what we love doing. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the PowettPlay Podcast, hosted by Kieran, Powell and Jordan Shannon. We hope you enjoyed this immersive dive into the world of cricket and business, exploring the unique experiences and perspectives of players past and present, alongside those invaluable insights into intriguing business themes that transcend beyond the boundaries of sporting heroics. Be sure to set your reminders on your Alexa or Google Home device. Or we won't tell anyone if you still use those paper calendar things from a bygone era. Join us next time for more inspiring dialogue with scintillating minds on the PowettPlay Podcast.